Picture this, a routine security check at a military base. Guards dump out a woman's bag, finding nothing but lip balm, a notebook, and oatmeal packets. Then they reach the final pocket. What they pull out makes every soldier in the room freeze in terror. An emblem so classified that seeing it drops their security clearance below hers. This is the story of Lieutenant Commander Aurora Rory Vale and how one small pin exposed the military's darkest conspiracy. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and if you want to hear more stories like this one, smash that subscribe button. Aurora Rory Vale had perfected the art of being invisible. At 43, she traded battlefield glory for the mind-numbing safety of logistics paperwork. Every morning she parked her sun-bleached sedan in the farthest row of Falcon Ridge Air Base, walked past satellite dishes that looked like frozen vultures, and disappeared into the administrative wasteland of Building 9. Her office was a pale green rectangle with one window facing a trash alley. Perfect. The monotony dulled her brain just enough to let her body rest, while her eyes processed requisition codes and serial numbers. She ate oatmeal softened with black coffee because sugar triggered memory flashes, and memory flashes triggered headaches. The white streak above her right temple told a story no one needed to hear. Younger staff thought it was premature stress. They never guessed it came from dragging two wounded operators out of Syrian mud while lightning from an incoming storm lit the hillside. The mortar that followed lifted shale, shrapnel, and electricity that scorched her scalp forever. But three things remained stubbornly unerased from her past. Titanium dog tags against her sternum, a carved wooden token that once bought her 30 precious seconds at a hostage gate in Chad, and hidden in her canvas bag, a miniature leather case containing a pin no bigger than a postage stamp, a matte black falcon clutching a lightning bolt, its tail splitting into 4 talons. That emblem was about to destroy everything. Officially, Special Operations Directive 4, call sign Red Falcon, had never existed. The unit was the Navy's most buried secret, with insignia minted in a batch of just 50. These weren't handed out to regular soldiers. They went to operators who agreed to disappear from public record entirely. Of those 50 operators, 32 were dead, 4 were missing. 13 were sealed behind classified identities so deep they could walk into the White House unchallenged. Rory was the 14th, but she'd chosen an even darker shade of invisibility. She'd signed the remission clause, surrendering all operational privileges, and melted into logistics. The paperwork was supposed to bury her past forever. Red Falcon operators weren't just elite soldiers. They were ghosts with government authorization to reshape reality. A single radio call could redirect satellites. Bodies were buried under desert moons with no questions asked. These weren't heroes in the traditional sense. They were surgical instruments of state power, wielded in conflicts that never made the news. The emblem in Rory's bag represented something more terrifying than any weapon. It represented absolute authority, the kind that operates beyond oversight, beyond accountability, beyond the reach of normal military command. And she was about to find out that some secrets refused to stay buried. But that wasn't the whole story. At 600 hours on a blistering Wednesday in June, 2 events cracked Rory's carefully constructed camouflage. First, an encrypted communication from Joint Special Operations Command requesting logistics projections for a black extraction theater somewhere east of longitude 50 degrees. The request twisted in her gut like cold iron. Second, Building 9's badge reader shorted out, forcing all personnel through the heavily militarized West Checkpoint. The West Checkpoint was usually reserved for flight crews and munitions convoys. When support staff were forced through, the guards enjoyed their power far too much. Clipboard sergeant, nobody knew his real name, paced the line barking orders, his mirrored shades reflecting every wince and slumped shoulder. Rory kept her gaze down and rehearsed the nothingness of her profile. Logistician, civilian equivalent, GS-12, access level 2, no anomalies. When her turn came, she placed the canvas bag on the conveyor, palms flat, eyes low, calm. The scanner beeped once, routine. Then Private Bradford frowned at something denser than coaxial connectors in the image. He asked about metallic pins or electronics. Rory answered with measured monotone, hiding the hum in her veins. No prohibited electronics, just tools and personal items. She could have shoved a colonel's clearance in his face and walked through. The remission clause deactivated her field privileges, but not the priority code embedded in her card's magnetic strip. Yet she chose subservience. It was safer. Bradford began emptying the bag onto a stainless steel table. Travel mug, Dojard notebook, micro driver set, cedar token, oatmeal pack, folded t-shirt. Items clacked like guilty coins into a plastic tray. Clipboard sergeant wandered over, scenting entertainment. Soon a half-circle of board security staff gathered, elbows propped on the rail, eyes hungry for anomaly. Bradford reached the final zipper. Rory's pulse tightened, but her face remained stone. The leather case tumbled out, weightless yet urgent, landing beside oil-blotched gloves. The private flipped it open, and time became viscous. The Black Falcon caught the overhead light with a shimmer so subtle most people would miss it. But those who knew, that infinitesimal fraction of military personnel whose clearances scraped the stratosphere, recognized absolutes in that shimmer. No-fail missions, bodies buried under desert moons, authority that could redirect satellites with a phone call. Bradford saw a bird and lightning bolt. Clipboard sergeant inhaled as though the air had barbed wire in it. The room's chatter collapsed. A phone rang twice behind the scanners and stopped, silent alarm to supervisory control. Sergeant lowered his shades, pupils constricted, breath hissing between clenched teeth. He glanced at Rory, then the emblem, then his men, calculation flickering like static across his jaw. What he said next was almost a whisper, but carried through the checkpoint like a rifle crack. "Nobody moves." Bradford blinked, confused. Rory felt the shift in power the way mariners feel pressure before a squall. Primordial, undeniable. Two MPs appeared as if conjured, hands resting on holsters, regulation theater. But fear in their eyes betrayed ignorance. They didn't know what they were guarding, only that the sergeant suddenly acted like they stood beside a live bomb. Rory raised her hands slowly, palms outward, fingers hovering centimeters from her ID lanyard. She could, with one swipe, invoke the code that would dissolve this entire scene beneath black-level overrides. But she waited, observed, calculated. Unmarked SUV screeched to a halt outside. Two officers in midnight blue dress approached at a jog. No rank pins, no name tags, only the subdued patch of Air Combat Command stitched into their shoulders. Sergeant Field's face drained to chalk. The tall officer's gaze shifted to the emblem, and Rory watched recognition ripple across features schooled never to reveal emotion. He composed himself, inhaled, then looked directly at her, not at her ID or the bag, but as if scanning bone for barcodes. "Lieutenant Commander Vale," he said, statement not question. "Why is a Red Falcon operator moving through this gate without escort?" A dozen heads pivoted toward her. The phrase "Red Falcon" detonated quietly in the checkpoint, blowing holes in every assumption about the plain woman in logistics khakis. And what happened next would shock everyone. Rory spoke for the first time since the humiliation started, her voice low, measured, polished smooth by years of silence. "Because, Colonel, this operator signed remission. I'm a non-combatant clerk. Paragraph 12C authorizes independent base transit under standard protocols." The colonel's eyes flicked to Fields, to Bradford, to the silent MPs, then back to Rory. Paragraph 12C also stipulates operators travel without identifiers that compromise their remission. Care to explain why that pin is in your possession? Rory exhaled through her nose, weariness rather than defiance. "Because I was advised to keep it, a reminder." She didn't add of what, she didn't need to. The colonel weighed responses, politics simmering behind his eyes. Security staff fidgeted, shrinking beneath tensions they couldn't name. Finally he nodded once. "Sergeant, return her property. Log a procedural error, then clear this gate within the hour." Fields opened his mouth to protest. The colonel cut him down with a glance. "That's an order." Bradford swept items back into Rory's bag with trembling hands. When he reached the leather case, he hesitated, holding it like it might electrocute him. Rory took it gently, slid it into the bag, zipped the pocket, and slung the canvas strap over her shoulder. No apology came. Humiliation never rewinds. But as she stepped past the metal detector, voices chased her down the corridor, whispers thick with speculation, fear, and newfound respect. By the time she reached Building 9, she'd compartmentalized the episode, yet aftershocks crept through the day like hairline fractures. The JSOC request now looked less random. Phone calls she couldn't trace pinged her extension, then vanished. At 1500 hours, a courier delivered a sealed envelope bearing no return code. Inside, a single sheet, black ink on gray cardstock, read Falcon Recall Protocol, effective immediately, remission suspended under Article 7. Report to Hangar 6, 1900 hours, signature redacted. Heat surged from her spine to throat. Article 7 recall was myth, the nuclear option of clandestine governance. It meant a scenario so critical, so temporally constrained, that living assets of an erased unit were considered the only failsafe. She counted hours to 1900, felt each second land like weight on a scale tipping back toward the woman she'd tried so hard to bury. But the real conspiracy was just beginning. At 1830, she closed her computer, locked drawers, and left the office exactly as the janitorial checklist required. Trash emptied, blinds half dropped, desktop cleared, because habits of order survive catastrophe. She walked the service alley past dumpsters humming with flies, past chain-link fence where prairie grass bent beneath hot wind, toward the flight line where hangars crouched like dark animals against a bruised sky. Every step stripped a layer of civilian pretense until only muscle memory guided her. Breathe through the heels, scan quadrants, catalog exits. The sun bled orange across tarmac, its dying light catching curved aluminum of an aircraft she hadn't seen in 13 years. A stealth reconnaissance bird that was officially decommissioned, but now glimmered like a resurrected god at Hangar 6's mouth. Two silhouettes waited under its wing, one tall, one compact, both draped in matte black flight suits that only Red Falcon alumni ever wore. The taller figure raised a hand, not a wave, but signal code spelling Valkyrie, Rory's old call sign. Static roared in her ears. The smaller silhouette stepped forward, night vision eyes, gravel voice. "Long time, Vale." "Rashid," she answered, surprised at her tone's steadiness. "I was told you were KIA." He shrugged, scarred mouth twitching. "Reports of my death were strategic necessity." Then he jerked a thumb toward the bird. "Wheels up in 40, briefing inside, we're going back." Back where, she almost asked, but part of her already knew. East of 50 degrees east, in desert whose sands still bore the imprint of her kneeling form as she whispered extraction codes into a blood-slick radio the day Red Falcon disbanded. The past wasn't done with any of them. The interior of Hangar 6 swallowed sound like an ancient chapel. Cold concrete echoed faintly beneath every footstep. Floodlights glowed soft and surgical across the recon jet's underbelly, casting distorted silhouettes against metallic walls. Three figures reunited by something older than duty and darker than command. Beside a folding table, a single screen displayed a frozen satellite frame of terrain Rory hadn't seen in over a decade. Desert, not just any desert, but the kind that didn't appear on conventional maps, where rivers dried mid-sentence and villages collapsed under wind and rumor. In the image, a compound of low, whitewashed structures ringed by fencing that cast no shadow. In the center courtyard, an outline she recognized immediately. The bent knee of a man in submission, hands bound, shadowed by two figures in asymmetrical gear. But it wasn't the kneeling prisoner that froze her blood. It was the object beside him. A box, matte black, barely larger than a backpack, but unmistakable. She spoke before she could stop herself. "That can't be. That unit was destroyed." The silent figure turned. Lieutenant Julia Keene, call sign Moth. last seen 7 years ago, presumed lost during a failed intercept in the Caspian corridor, but her face was unmistakable. Older, the softness weathered away, but her stare still carried that strange, deliberate weight that once could silence entire briefings. That box wasn't part of the failed program, Moth said. It's a successor, and it's active. The implications hit like ice water. If it was active, someone had access to original encryption, to Red Falcon archives, to material promised locked forever in an Arctic server silo with suicide burn built into the code. Rashid grunted, crossed his arms. We think the box moved 2 weeks ago, not by anyone on the Five Eyes grid. This was internal, deep internal. Moth tapped twice on the screen. A new image flickered into place. Another satellite frame of a drone scattered across rock, partially disassembled. She pointed to a marking on one of the inner fins. Rory squinted. It was faint, worn, barely distinguishable through pixelation, but there it was, a falcon partially burned away, one of their old birds. The implication wasn't just betrayal, it was resurrection. Someone had taken pieces of Red Falcon, scraps, relics, forgotten tech, and reassembled them into something operational, something mobile, something pointed at the wrong side of the board. They didn't just pull our wreckage from that mountain, Rashid said. They reprogrammed it. Whoever's behind this doesn't want to revive the Falcon, they want to hijack it. And then Moth revealed something that changed everything. Moth held up a small object between gloved fingers. Rory recognized the material instantly. Carbon-weave dog tags, standard issue only to Deep Cloak operatives. The code etched into it was hers, or rather her backup alias. A decoy identity used only once in a mission that had never been declassified, and now someone had retrieved it. For the first time in years, Rory felt the edges of herself reconfiguring. Not just muscle memory, not just instinct, but something deeper, purpose. The kind of cold, clean purpose that eroded fear. She nodded once, slowly. They're baiting us. Whoever this is, they knew we'd come. Moth said nothing. Rashid muttered, and we're going anyway. Rory looked at the recon jet's wing. Sleek, silent, still warm from calibration. What's the window? 17 hours, extraction must happen in 6. Infill happens at 300 local. You'll go in alone, they'll spot more than one. I assumed as much. Her tone was flat, not brave, just final. Moth reached into a case beside the monitor and pulled out a patch, black thread. The falcon and bolt, same as before, but this one had been altered. A crimson border now surrounded the emblem, a silent signal. No backup, no communications trace, no extraction unless the mission completes. Not a threat, a fact. Rory took it, ran her thumb over the stitching. Then Moth added without emotion, they cleared your remission, you're activated. At 1941, the jet rolled into darkness, silent, purposeful. At 1943, the base's satellite feed reclassified her profile from support to field activated. At 1947, the sky swallowed the plane whole, and beneath her seat, tucked in the same pocket where Oatmeal used to live, the Falcon emblem glinted faintly under soft red cabin light, an old secret reborn. Altitude stripped sound from her ears long before the horizon appeared. At 37,000 feet above Afghanistan's southern corridor, the recon jet drifted like a thought through the jet stream, silent and cold. Its fuselage wrapped in black polymer skin that drank radar and moonlight alike. Inside, Rory sat alone, eyes closed, breath steady, every nerve sinking back into the operating rhythm she'd once lived by. Below stretched terrain she'd walked once before, on foot, under fire, under orders that left 10 bodies buried in soil that didn't belong to them, and one child alive who was never supposed to be there. The mission briefing described an objective: extract the black box, intercept the local handler, disappear. But Rory had seen the timing, the signals, the way data was found too easily. This wasn't recovery, it was a test, or worse, a setup. At 2:41 local time, the plane banked southeast and dropped to a whispering glide over jagged terrain. She released seat straps without ceremony, slipped into thermal harness, and sealed the drop mask over her jaw. No countdown, just gravity, and then she was gone. She landed in near silence, chute absorbing into sand like a black veil collapsing, crouched, rifle up, scanning. No movement, no wind, just us coiled into stillness. It took 8 minutes to reach the compound. Its walls were low, mud brick perimeter designed to look civilian, but too symmetrical, too wide around edges to be anything but paramilitary. She found an access point near the Western power box and waited. The silence was surgical. She slipped inside, following the heat trace from the briefing image. Inner courtyard, box in the center, prisoner kneeling. Except there was no prisoner now, just the box, and the person who stood beside it. A woman dressed in matte black gear, unarmed, face uncovered and unmistakable. Moth, keen, the same woman who had briefed her 24 hours earlier. For a second, Rory's breath caught. She raised her weapon but didn't fire because the look in Moth's eyes wasn't hostile. It was sad. "I told you they reactivated Red Falcon," Moth spoke first. "I didn't say who reactivated it." Rory stayed frozen. "What is this?" Moth's hand stayed visible. "They brought us here to see if we'd come willingly, to see who would return when called. You're not with JSOC. No one is, not anymore." The box at her feet hissed, soft venting of heat, a red light blinking once, twice like a heartbeat. Rory stepped closer. "What's in it?" "Proof," Moth answered. "Not of our orders, not of their war, but of what they did to us." The truth was more devastating than any weapon. Rory lowered her weapon by inches. Moth continued, voice calm. "You were right, this wasn't about extraction. This was about revelation. The emblem in your bag, they planted it there. You didn't pack it." "I zipped that bag myself." "You zipped what they gave you." Behind her, the black box clicked once. Moth nodded toward it. "They don't want to control us anymore. They want to erase us entirely, but they needed to see who still responded, who still remembered." Rory's mouth was dry, so they set a trap. "No," Moth said, "we did." In that instant, the ground shook faintly, not from below, but from above. A vibration across the courtyard, a signal. Rory turned slowly and looked to the eastern sky. A drone formation, barely visible but unmistakable. "Those are ours," she whispered. Moth shook her head. "Not anymore." The box hissed again. On its surface, a symbol appeared. Not the falcon, not the bolt, but a name. Red Falcon Archive 0.1. It wasn't a weapon, it was a memory vault. Rory stared at it, realization blooming in her chest like fire. This wasn't a strike mission, it was a broadcast. Every mission, every kill order, every denied operation Red Falcon had executed over 15 years was stored inside, and it was now online. Moth turned, her voice cold now. "The moment they scanned your bag, the clock started. The emblem wasn't just symbolic. It was a beacon. We were the trigger, and now the world will see who we really were." Rory stepped back, not out of fear, but awe. "You're burning it all down." "No," Moth said, "we're letting them see the ashes." Then from above, the first signal flickered across the sky. A brief pulse of blue that stretched silently from horizon to horizon. Transmission began. The silence shattered. Inside bases around the world, encrypted terminals blinked, names decrypted, files unlocked, photos surfaced, and the code name Valkyrie scrolled across classified feeds seen by presidents, generals, and ghosts. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply lowered her rifle, stepped toward the box, and sat beside Moth, the weight of years finally finding a place to settle. The war they had buried had come home. And this time, no one could pretend it didn't exist. The world didn't end with a bang or siren. It ended with red notifications on 1,000 black screens. Inside NATO command centers, underground bunkers, aircraft carriers, and embassies, senior officers stopped mid-sentence as encrypted feeds cracked open like old bones. The emblem appeared first, a falcon clutching a bolt, then a list of names. Some dead, some presumed dead, and others like Rory Vale, suddenly unerased. She watched it unfold from a room beneath the compound, sitting in darkness beside the still humming black box, her heart calm in the eye of a storm she hadn't fully understood until now. Above her, Moth monitored the stream without emotion, occasionally adjusting the data pulse or mooting inbound attempts to sever the signal. Attempts failed. The system was hardened beyond anything conventional. What they had unleashed wasn't a leak. It was a confession machine, a vault they'd spent years constructing from fragments of intercepted logs, erased recordings, burn-after-read memos, and ghost transmissions salvaged from the dark edges of Falcon's collapse. It had one purpose: to show the cost of silence. The stream reached embassies in Berlin, Tokyo, Canberra, Buenos Aires, Cairo. Former allies blinked at footage of unauthorized strikes, ghost detainments, secret renditions tagged with names of operatives who were supposed to never have existed. Families who had received caskets with no bodies saw for the first time what happened in corridors never built on maps. And in one particular Pentagon terminal, an aging general sat motionless as a clip loaded, showing his own voice authorizing the liquidation of Asset Valkyrie in 2011. An order never carried out. Rory saw it too. The date, the location, her own image entering a building in Homs, Syria, 20 minutes before an IED collapsed the wing. They had tried to erase her once before, not metaphorically, literally. She leaned back, hand resting on her knee, and felt nothing but clarity. There was no rage, no heartbreak, just confirmation. Moth finally spoke. It's reached the final node. Nothing can stop it now. The entire archive will be mirrored and replicated globally within 42 minutes. Rory nodded slowly, and after that we disappear again, but not as ghosts, as consequences. Outside, the wind shifted, not violent, just different, a change in the weight of the night. They had set fire to the structure that created them, and now it would burn in every direction. Red Falcon wasn't being resurrected. It was being laid bare so that it could never be rebuilt. For Rory, that was enough. Not justice, not vengeance, just the truth, finally free of containment. 3 weeks later, the checkpoint at Falcon Ridge was replaced, not upgraded, removed. The men who had dumped her bag were reassigned without warning. Internal memos marked it as routine personnel shift, but those who were there knew better. In the supply annex, Rory's desk remained empty. No explanation given, no box cleared. The drawer still held a faded notebook, one spoon, a metal ring with a burned edge. Across the world, the stream faded slowly from headlines, buried under noise, reclassified under new code names. But something lingered, not in the news, not in policy, but in silence, in the way younger officers paused at locked doors, in how colonels no longer laughed when a woman stepped into the room, in the occasional whisper when a drone lost signal mid-flight and someone muttered, "Red Falcon." Rory Vale was gone again, not buried, not hidden, just folded into the fabric of consequence. She had never asked for recognition, only to not be erased. Now in some dark archive, the world knew her name. That was enough. Some stories don't end with applause. Some end with silence and the quiet knowledge that the truth was seen. The Red Falcon conspiracy showed us that even the most classified secrets can't stay buried forever. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a bomb, but the truth itself, waiting patiently in the shadows until someone brave enough decides to let it free. If you stayed until the end, tell us in the comments what you would have done in Rory's place. Would you have stayed hidden in logistics, or would you have answered the call? And if you believe stories like this one deserve to be told, share this video with someone who needs to see it. The algorithm might try to bury content like this, but the truth has a way of finding its audience. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because we're just getting started with stories that challenge everything you think you know about power, secrecy, and the cost of silence. The next video drops in a day, and trust me, you won't want to miss what we've uncovered next.